When is the last time you listened to a podcast about web development, web design, and small business and didn't fall asleep? Yes, we cover web development, web design, and small business, but like actual human beings with personalities. If you're a beginner, we're not going to talk over your head. It's more like asking your buddy for help. We have guests, we have fun, and let me tell you, these two can get off on a tangent. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to HTML All the Things Podcast. This is Matt Lawrence and Mike Curran.
That's right, everybody. We are back. This is the HTML All the Things podcast. This is a bit of a working title, but it was the title I was going to go with, but now I want to change it. So it's not a super draft. It's just a late draft. Anyway, a super ticket, if anyone is from Canada and knows what that means from Cineplex. Anyway, the working title is The First Step Trap: Why Buying Domain Names Isn't Starting Your Project. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about something that sounds unrelated, but I don't believe it is unrelated, which is taking the first step to actually completing some of your side projects. And I think that a lot of us are replacing that with buying domains. And that's why we have a million ideas and a million domains. And so we'll get into that in this episode. Also, we're going to try something a little bit different in this episode. We've been talking about show formatting a little bit, and we want to get a little bit more conversational. So some of our topics, a lot of our episodes are very like lecture based. So it'd be, at least that's what I call it, where let's say I'm talking at you for 15 minutes or Mike is talking at you for 15 minutes. And then the other people kind of come back and maybe they have, and Mike mentioned this before the show, they may have like let's say Mike's talking to me for 15 minutes about a topic. And then I come back with like 5 minutes of like comment because we don't want the show to be 3.5 hours. Mike is like hesitant to respond to me. So then it's just like, okay, moving on. And so I kind of want our topics to be a bit more conversational, same topic and all this. So if you find the pace to be a little weird, we're trying this out and we're, going to see how it goes. Hopefully it's something that works out well. But anyway, if this all sounds interesting to you and you want to support the show, you can go and check us out on that Patreon, leave a review or rating on your podcast app, and join us in our Discord server or share this with your friends. And remember, you can get up to 20% off your Scrimba subscription. You can learn how to code using their interactive media player code editor, where you can pause the lesson, play with the code, break the code, figure out what the heck was that thing doing? What was the instructor doing? Figure it out, press play, and the lesson continues just as it was. They have full stack courses now. So they now cover front end. They now cover back end as well. So go and check that out. Our link, scrimba.com/links/HTML, all the things. The full details will be on htmlallthethings.com in the show notes. So, Mike, I want to open this up actually with a question. Instead of me talking at you, this is very actually impromptu. We don't have like prompts in our show notes or anything like that. But I want to open this up with a question, and that is, are you, or do you, I suppose, fall into the camp of many developers that have like 1,000,001 ideas with 0 complete, or maybe like 1 complete? And do you have like 1,000,001 domain names as well?
Yeah, good question. And I definitely fall in the camp of having 1,000,001 ideas that are not complete. But I will say I have been pretty hesitant to buy domain names. Now, that's not to say I haven't bought any domain names. I have like a mikek.dev domain name, I believe, that not really doing much other than redirecting to my Blue Sky right now, that I could definitely do something with, like a portfolio page or whatever. But that's, I think, honestly, it, outside of some of the business domain names that we have. Now, the ideas side, yeah, I have tons of ideas, but maybe we'll get into this in an episode. I'm of the mindset that until you have the idea and you've almost like vetted it to a certain degree, no point in buying a domain name, because domain names don't mean that much anymore, especially because the good ones are all kind of stupidly expensive anyway. So ideas, I have a lot of ideas in my head, but yeah, just not at the step of like some of the like for profiles I've seen on GoDaddy. I think one developer was like 28 yearly recurring domain names with like 1 or 2 in actual active state. It's insane. So much money.
I mean, I'm definitely in the camp of having a lot of domain names. I don't believe it's 28. And I will say a lot of the domain names we actually host or have registered for clients. Many of these clients are not tech savvy. Some literally are, out in like rural areas, and their business, like they can barely load their own website kind of thing because of the lack of internet kind of deal. So we handle all of their digital marketing and all of their online presence for them, and they call us for, help and things like that. And I mean, thankfully, rural internet in Canada has gotten better. So I mean, like some of them have been able to actually, interact, or like I give them access and they actually edit things now. But many of the domains that we have are definitely for clients. I will say though, like when I want to say half of them, but it's one of those things that maybe has gotten away from me, and I have not done like an audit. But I do have a bunch of random domain names. We came up with a few ideas during COVID that we never executed, but we did very specifically grab really good domain names, actually. Ones that were like early and they were in like not .io, but like, not a .com kind of thing. I don't want to give away what the domain names are. And then I have, like you said, you have a MikeK.com or whatever it is. I have mattlawrence.ca, which does nothing. I think it's just parked on GoDaddy. And I bought that years and years ago. And I think the thing with this episode is going to be that we're going to kind of poo-poo the idea of buying domain names a lot, but it's not always a bad idea. So you actually mentioned something good there, Mike, where you said, you could do something with that, but for the moment it's just pointing to your blue sky. I think that you grabbing something that is like such a, I want to say brand identity, but that's not really the case. It's like, it's a personally valuable domain. So it's your name, right? .com, .ca, whatever it is. And for the audience, maybe you use a .net or a .org or like whatever applies to your specific name, your use case, your brand, or whatever. Having something like that, I do think is still valuable. Obviously, like for SEO purposes, you can kind of get around it. But if you could have your name, it's like, I don't want to be mattlawrence2.ca. You know what I mean? Like it still kind of diminishes the brand a little bit. It makes me feel like, oh, okay. Because I think that was my name in college. Like the username, like someone else was Matt Lawrence. And so I was Matt Lawrence too. And it's like, all right. And we actually had issues with that. Teachers were messaging the wrong Matt Lawrence. So they're like, where are you? I'm like, I'm 2. I'm the second one.
God, that sucks. Rip Matt Lawrence 1, I guess.
Well, it's also like a meme too. I remember back in the 360 days, people would be like, I don't know, like a band would, Billy Talent or something. And it would be like Billy Talent 241. And I was like, because Billy Talent 240 was taken. It's always the meme. But I do think there is a place and like a right time and a right reason to purchase like a domain. And sometimes even as the first or an early step. So like domain being personally valuable is something we already covered. But you could also say something that is very brand identity conscious. Some clients, some people, we've dealt with some, we still deal with some, are like super brand heavy, where something like a missing font, like a random bit of text on their site that has the wrong font type, even if it's close and that's why it was missed, is like a major emergency to them. So if you have like a super strong brand identity and you think that it's like really unique and it's memorable and whatever, I mean, if you're like, this app that I'm making under this brand identity is going to take 6 months, but let's just say the app is called htmlthethings.com. So it's like, or the app is called HTML the Things. It's like, well, htmlthethings.com is available. Should we buy it now? And it's like, no, I'm going to follow, I'm not going to do that as my first step. I'm going to do that later because I don't want it to be like a misstep. And I think that is actually a misstep. Sometimes it does make sense to make buying a domain early make sense. Strong brand identity, personally valuable, those type of things. Also limited availability. You mentioned that earlier, Mike, where it's like, if something comes up, like if it's something like really good, like, I don't know, something, videogamenews.com or something like that. If that like suddenly comes up, you're trying to open a video game news site and you want that domain, I mean, you better grab that. That's limited availability. It's only going to be available for a short duration. It's niche specific. It's a good set of words. So like, yeah, grab that.
So like my pushback on that is, what do you mean by good brand identity? Because if you have good brand identity, as in like you've proven out that this brand is worth something, outside of the domain name,
Mhm.
whether it be by, your physical location or I don't really know how you prove that out. Maybe that's another question or another whole episode. But like, I feel like until you do that, or until you have some sort of evidence that maybe you've already put in some of the work, in my opinion, until you have like a step in that direction, I don't know if it makes sense to buy it. Because let's say htmlthings.com, that's a good example because we have that domain name. If we were to go about and be like, okay, this is a great idea, htmlthings.com, all that, we have that conversation. We're like, this is a great brand identity because htmlthings.com, maybe it means a lot to web developers. I mean, right now it does. But then we just like buy it and don't do anything. That's what we're trying to like kind of talk people out of, right? I think there has to be some momentum in the direction of doing something. And like, yes, you have to be passionate about the brand identity. I agree with that. But I don't know if like the first step of buying a domain name even makes sense if that brand identity is really big. Now, again, if you're the brand and you're starting to be popular in some space, right? That's outside of the web, like your personal whatever, like I don't know, you're on the lecture circuit or something. I don't know. That, like, you've proven some brand identity there. That makes sense to me to buy the domain name. But there's probably other instances of something like that. But my hesitation is to recommend people buy domain names until they've shown that they can stick to whatever project they've decided to stick to. Because it can snowball really quickly to the point where like, oh, I bought like 5 domain names over the past 6 months because each one has a really good brand identity, but I didn't really execute on any of them.
Yeah, like I agree with that. I think when I say brand identity, it would be something like you've actually done the first step. So like, so the entire idea of the episode, it just to kind of like recap from the beginning, is that a lot of people will say, I have 1,000,001 ideas. And so they choose one randomly. They have like a spare Sunday. They're like, I want to work on one of my side projects. I want to start one. I finally want to get one of these things done. And then they choose those ideas and they try to go for it. And they kind of like, they're analyzing it. They're choosing which one. They land on one and they go, okay, I'm now going to purchase the domain name. And then they stop and nothing's really ever done. And I think, or like, I don't think the thing I'm trying to point out is that the first step, it's cliche, but the first step of anything is usually the hardest or one of the hardest things to do. And I think that we as developers are treating purchasing the domain as the first step. And I think that that's a misstep. Now, the reason why I wanted to like kind of discuss sometimes it is not, and the brand identity question is a good question, is for the same reason why if it's personally valuable, it's valuable. So I'll explain. So if it's your name, you already kind of have an investment in yourself. Like you are you, that's your name, unless you're going to change it unless you're going to change it, you want your name to be like a part of your brand, I imagine, right? If you do, having your name.com or .ca or whatever makes a lot of sense. And so you're not at step 1 because you're not at like the step 1 of your life, if that makes sense. So it's not necessarily a misstep because if I grab that domain, normally it is not that expensive. If it is super expensive, then obviously, consider your choices. But if it's not that expensive, like me personally, I like having mattlawrence.ca. It's like, it's a little bit of an emotional attachment. Obviously, I'm invested in myself. Like I woke up this morning, I had my breakfast, so I've like lived to this point. And so I'm not at step 1. And so that gives me a green check mark for that. Like that the domain is personally valuable. The strong brand identity is a great question because you're right. Like if someone comes up with an idea and they say this is going to be, a joke website and it's going to be there's going to be jokes every day. It's going to have, these comedians on there. It's going to have this, it's going to be like, I don't know, whatever type of comedy. You want to have light comedy, raunchy comedy, whatever. You choose a genre of comedy and you really have like a great brand identity idea, but you don't have anything done, then I don't know if you have a strong brand identity. When I say strong brand identity, I'm thinking more in the way of someone has gone to like a graphic designer or they have started graphic designing themselves. They've started looking at what like a general sitemap would be, what a very high level even content plan would be. And I don't mean just thoughts in your head. I mean, they've jotted it down, maybe even borderline business plan. And so if you decide like, I'm going to have the absolute best, website, and it's going to be like mattlawrencejokes.com or some stupid thing like that. And like you decide all these things, you have even some like logos made up, you have all these brand identities, maybe you have maybe even some writers selected or people you're going to reach out to write for the site because they're good comedy writers, things like that. You are beyond that first step. So to me, it's not a misstep. You're not into the technical side though, right? Because like developers, when we come up with 1,000,001 ideas, we generally want to develop it ourselves. But sometimes we realize like, hey, I don't have a lot of time and this idea is big, but I really want to do this idea. So then we do go through the steps of getting logos and getting all those brand identity things that I've already mentioned made. And to me, that would be your first step. And so even though you haven't made your first technical step as a developer would expect to, I think at that point, it's like, I have a strong brand identity. I should really buy this. Because how much would it suck if it was like, I have mattlawrencejokes.com. I have Matt Lawrence Jokes on, X, on Blue Sky, on this, on that. But on Threads, it's Matt Lawrence Jokes 2. That really sucks. And I know that that's not a domain name, but the same could be said about the domain name, right? Instead of having mattlawrencejokes.com, it's mattlawrencejokes2.com. Like, that sucks. And so at that point, that's what I mean by strong brand identity. And realistically speaking, you could even kind of equate this, although this isn't like the business launching podcast, but you could even say that this is a part of like a broader launch strategy where you're so into this idea that you've made all that brand identity stuff and all the rest of it. But those bits of brand identity generally come from ideas, many of which are jotted down, such as, again, the writers, the content plan, all the rest of it. And so this thing's going to have like a launch. This thing isn't just going to launch randomly and you're going to send out a tweet and say like, hey, come check out my app. It converts photos from JPEG to WebP. This is going to be like a big launch where you're like, hey man, this is like a funny website. We have 100 articles to start. We have a podcast or something coming out. And so at that point, I think buying a domain early makes a heck of a lot of sense.
Yes, and I think you've pointed out a lot of really important things. Like, you've already shown that you have interest in the idea by completing all of those steps, like business plan, like a concrete motion in that direction, right? Like, you vetted it a little bit, you did some research, and you found that this is a strong brand identity, right? I think that's where people fall apart, is like, they in their head think it's a strong brand identity because they're like, oh, cool, like a jokes website, cool, like mattsjokes.com, like that's great. But then they go and look, like, realistically, oh, there's like a billion jokes websites, right? Like, you spend a day or so or a couple hours looking and you see that, okay, that doesn't really fit into like, my name doesn't really fit into the jokes category, right? No one knows who I am, so it doesn't make sense. So you can vet that out. Whereas if you, like, again, spend that time, you get through that vetting process, you have to trust yourself at some point. You can't not trust yourself, because if you get through that vetting process and you find that you do have the motivation to continue, that's a good sign to buy a domain name. Because at the end of the day, we're talking about it and stuff like that, like it's a prohibitive thing, but they're cheap. Like, for the most part, domain names are cheap. That's why people have this habit of buying a bunch of them. What I really want to instill in people, and instill in myself almost as well, is that, like, until I've tried an idea, I don't want to go to jump to another one. So I think that's where the disconnect a lot of times for me is like, I get buying a domain name and being like instinctive about it sometimes. What a lot of developers end up doing is like, they'll buy a domain name because of an instinct, and then they'll buy another one because of an instinct, and without starting them and without continuing them. I feel like you should buy, like, you do what Matt said, plan out the idea, find the right fit, buy the domain name, and then try it out. And trying it out could be a million different things. It could be, a landing page. It could be talking to a community. Like, there's many different ways without even building something like an app that you can vet the idea, right? With the domain name that you bought, all that. And if it has any legs, and if you have any motivation to continue, you continue. And if it doesn't, then you have to admit to yourself that it was a bad idea and cancel the subscription. This is the key step here. We're talking about domains. Cancel the renewal subscription to the domain name and move on to the next one. That's okay, in my opinion. That is a perfectly okay strategy if you're looking for new ideas and stuff like that. As long as you cancel the previous one because you vetted it and you've done X and Y and Z, it's okay to buy the next one.
I just like right before watching this, or right for oh yeah, I'm watching my own podcast. Right before recording this, I watched a video on YouTube about these guys that are making money on Roblox. And they're developers, like, because you develop games on Roblox, like there's coding and marketing and everything else involved. And I was unaware of, I understood where Roblox was a little bit, but basically it's like a YouTube of video games. If that's the best kind of way I can sum it up, go look it up if you're interested. But the one guy said that he spent something like, I don't know, 50 grand or something like that on his first project, and it just flopped. Like, it didn't do well. And it was like, oh my God, like there goes 50K. But then he started another one and he just did that in 2 weeks. Like, he told his developer and co-founder that, hey man, let's just make a game in 2 weeks. And now he lives off of that money. And so his sentiment was test first and build later. Because if you try to build something that's super amazing, fully featured, all these great things, you put all that time and money into it, people might show up and be like, like it's not even cool, right? And then they just don't even bother with it. And so like that, I mean, like obviously it kind of stuck with me for the moment just because I just watched it. But it's interesting to hear that even with something like a Roblox, because I didn't know really how you made Roblox games. Like, this is my first exposure to seeing Roblox sort of like their marketing on Instagram and things like that sometimes. And like, influencers will show videos. And I found it like super interesting that even in something that I want to say it's a no-code tool, but it isn't, but it's like it's a figured out place to put games on, right? It's not like you're just like making a game on whatever, like whatever engine, whatever this, whatever that. It seems to be like, hey, like, put this on Roblox. Here's how you get paid. Here's the currency. Here's how the microtransactions works. Like, it's very much like a figured out process. Even there, the process, I guess, of taking a idea and like progressing with it and building, whether it's building in public or whatever, it kind of applies. And I thought that was super interesting. And so that, you're 100% right, Mike, is like, could you imagine doing all the brand identity stuff, getting everything all up and running and everything, putting all this money into like making 100 articles, doing all this stuff, making the website, deploying it, the whole shebang, you put it out there, it flops, and now it's like, okay, on to the next one, but you keep the domain name. like you keep the domain name throughout this whole time. You're like still paying the hosting costs. You're still paying for this thing to be up there. And it's kind of like, why would I necessarily, do that? And it's sort of like, I don't know. It's like it's like a weird, it's almost like a sentimental thing or something like that. Like domain names are like, obviously the beginning of the episode and the aim of the episode is to say, don't make it your first step. It's not a meaningful first step. Like, buying a domain name is not a meaningful first step. But it's weird how we just like hang on to them. And I never hear anyone say I canceled the domain name. And like you just said it, you're like, yeah, try making this whole thing. And however you decide to build this product, you build the product, you ship it. Now what? And if it fails, it's like, okay, cool, shut down, get rid of the domain name. I still have a couple domains from clients that have shut down, and I still have the domain names. I have it's like 2, I think, but it's like every year I'm like, oh, I gotta get rid of that. And then it renews for a year. And it's like, oh my God, I gotta get rid of that. Then it renews for a year. And it's like, again, I gotta get rid of that. I don't know what it is. It's like a weird, it's like we hang on to it. And it's like, and the reason why I even brought up, I guess, that Roblox video as well, is that this person didn't stick with their project that didn't do well and like try to fix it. Sometimes, you have to do that if you really believe in the product and you think that there was just something wrong with the launch or there was something wrong with the marketing. But it's just interesting that like, it's just sometimes just better to move on. And it's like a domain name for some reason, like keeps us anchored there or something. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, and like to be clear, I think most people, not even just developers, most people that have ideas are pretty like attached to those ideas even after they're done with them. And so like I have a friend that had a business idea like, I don't know, 7-8 years ago, bought the domain name, built the website, everything, like, built the Shopify or whatever. I can't remember exactly what service he used, but it was just one for non-devs. and he was paying for it up until this year. He still pays for the domain because he's attached to the domain, but he canceled the hosting, which is good. But he was paying for hosting for 7 years on a thing that never got anywhere. And so, like, I think that's the standard, and that's why these companies with the subscription models make killer money, because most people don't want to cancel subscriptions. I think it's a psychological thing. Even like, Netflix and stuff and all that, like people will buy Netflix and then not use it. People will buy other like services and not use it and just leave it on just in case a show comes out, not realizing that they could just, resubscribe at any time. Anyway, like there's a psychological aspect of subscriptions that really is tough to break for a person in general. So it's nothing on you, people listening to this. Like if you're part of this kind of conversation and you're part of this, you're part of the problem kind of thing, you're like, that's the majority. That's most people. We're trying to lay out a framework that allows you to break out of it, which again, like there's a couple of different things you can do. I think, in my opinion, the first thing is before you buy a domain name, again, like Matt said, have that bit of time, like have a little bit of a buffer at least to figure out what that is. Don't just like, oh shit, I need that domain name, again, unless it's a strong brand identity like Matt mentioned and stuff like that, like unless you have a personal valuable to it and whatever. Like there's a few exceptions, but for the most part, give yourself some time. And this happens to me all the freaking time. Like literally have an idea. I even sometimes tell Matt about it because I feel like telling someone about it kind of exposes it as being good or bad, whether they agree with it or not. Like sometimes I'll tell Matt an idea and he'll be like, that's a sick idea. But that process of telling him, I've in my own head figure out 10 different reasons why it's not. And then I move on and I won't buy the domain name for it, right? Like I have this vetting process that I've established. Now, it might be too crazy. Like I think I've gone to the point where like I'm vetting out maybe potentially good ideas.
Yeah, like too strict, maybe.
Yeah, too strict. Yeah. So I need to like move it a little bit to the other side where like I do, execute a little bit more on the ideas. But regardless, my vetting process is giving myself time to think about the idea, research it a little bit, and if it's good, then buy the domain name. I don't really put a lot of value on domain names. I want to be clear about that. I think that there's, if I think of one good domain name, I could probably think of 5 others that fit the same product 99% of the time. So like if one disappears after a week, like I'm not attached to it. Like, names aren't a big thing to me. So I think that helps not buy domain names for me because I know I can get to the point where I can do it. But the other part is that like, I think you just need to find your own vetting process, right? Like find something that works for you that's maybe not as rigid as mine is and allows you to still execute on the ideas, but try to give yourself a break by allowing yourself to buy the domain, but also canceling the domains that you already have. I think that's the key takeaway that I want to kind of give people. Allow yourself to cancel.
What's interesting about that, and this is not where I thought the episode was going to go, but what's interesting about that is that many developers will talk about their never-ending list of ideas, but they will not ever talk about the fact that they have 20 ideas in the pipe and 120 ideas that they've gotten rid of. Like they're not crossing off. It's just sort of like, I have this idea, this idea, this idea, this idea, and then it's like, you're 10 years into your career and now you have 150 ideas. And this like idea book is like so deep. So like now even going in on like a random Sunday where you have some time and being like, I'm going to work on one of these ideas, open up your book and you see 150 ideas. Just the thought of going through 150 ideas is tiresome enough. And if you do end up choosing one of these ideas out of the 150, I can see why people think it's a meaningful first step to purchase a domain name. Or they're almost exhausted at this point. They're like, oh, okay, you know what? I've selected this. I've selected whatever it is. This is the name of it. I'm going to go and buy the domain. Okay, great. And then it's kind of like close the book, close the laptop, and you kind of walk away for the day. And that's something that I want to tackle in this episode, which is kind of ultimately what we're talking about here is I think that we need to, if you have an idea list, I think you need to make like a meaningful first step. And I'm not one to have completed a million of my ideas. I'm not one to have completed many of my ideas even, but I have completed a lot of client projects. And this is where this comes from because, I just like anyone else, I've procrastinated away time and time again where I could have got this thing done on Monday, but I'll wait till Wednesday. Oh, now I only have 3 days. Oh, something's wrong now. So now I'm going to be up all night. And you you really have to kind of dive into to this client project. But the thing is once, something that was supposed to take 7 days and I decided to start it on Wednesday and I had it on Monday, I'm still almost always able to get it done. And that's because I took a meaningful first step, admittedly a late one, but I took a meaningful first step and I was able to be like, okay, like this is what I worked, for 2 hours and I got stuck on this one thing. And now I get like sucked into like solving that problem. Or I get like addicted to the fact that like, hey, I just put in a couple hours of work. I don't want that time to go to waste. I need to continue doing that. And so I actually finish it, in 3 to 5 days rather than the 7. And the point here is that with like our own personal ideas, I think that we need to master the art, easier said than done, of making a meaningful first step. The domain is not a meaningful first step. Short of the exceptions that we've discussed at length in the beginning of this episode here now, I like the domain name purchase is not a meaningful first step for developer projects. Some meaningful first steps is what I would say is like, Mike, you have a process. You've mentioned that. But the things off the top of my head would be something like you actually do something in the project. Like what I call this like a big juicy step, if you will, where you're actually diving in and starting to problem solve. And you're maybe building a core feature, or you're trying a core feature, or you're seeing if something's possible. And you get pulled into the troubleshooting. And we've all been there, right? Where you've been procrastinating for days, you finally get into a project, you get stuck on a problem, and you're like, oh my God, and you're 2 hours in, you get sucked into the troubleshooting because you want to solve it, and now 7 additional hours have gone by, and you're 10, 11 hours into the day at this point, and you're like, oh my God, like where did all that time go? And it's like, yeah, but now you've not only started, got stuck and got unstuck, potentially learn new skills and this and that. That is like a big juicy step that cuts through procrastination. For me, it like kind of kills anxiety even of like anticipating like having to work on something. It's like I've actually dove in, got it done. Ideally, you would not procrastinate, so you'd have even more time, so it would be even less of a rush. You would just sort of get in there and do it. But the point of the matter is, I think that more of our ideas as developers would succeed is if we took a first step that was like a juicy first step. Something that's actually fully engaging, that you're seeing something be done. And I was actually talking to ChatGPT about this and kind of bouncing ideas off of it. And one of the things that it suggested, and I disagree with this, is it said, well, setting up a development environment is something that some people would consider challenging and time consuming, depending on the complexity of the development environment. That's true. And so that's a meaningful first step. I think that this is going to be very subjective, but I think that that's actually not a meaningful first step. The reason why is because, at least in my brain, it's like I'm still just kind of like setting up the scaffolding. It's like a more advanced domain purchase to me. Like the domain is kind of a bit of scaffolding. All I've done is I've went into the development environment and I've like just kind of briefly put things together. And it didn't even really I didn't even put it together. I put my tools in the toolbox, ready to go to work tomorrow. And then I left and it was like, I'll pick up the toolbox tomorrow, pushing it away and away and away. And then all of a sudden that idea is now dead, right? It's clearly I'm not going to continue. Whereas if I like started the job, I'd be like, oh, I got to get that roof on there tomorrow. I got to do this. I got to do that. And that like list of things starts becoming about the project and not about the scaffolding around the project or about starting the project. It starts to be more about the actual thing. And you can still fail after this too. Like, I mean, I've like started many times. I'm going to learn Svelte. 5-6 times I've like set up the Svelte environment and then just like never gone back. A couple of times I've gotten into a project and then have gotten stuck in it a little bit where I like complete part of a page or whatever. And then I stop. So this is not like a foolproof way to do it. But even myself, I saw myself the instant I took a juicy step, I actually went in and did something for the project, which was work on, I think I was just learning to do like a dynamic landing page. The instant I actually stepped into that, got confused on some things and needed to learn, I went back for like 3 to 5 sessions to mess around with Svelte to get that landing page working. So, and I don't know like what the solution, maybe Mikey, maybe you have some insight into this, what the solution is to continuing even past that. But the point is, I was pulled in for 4 or 5 sessions. Whereas if I choose an idea, set up the development environment today, and maybe even purchase a domain, dare I say, I mean, I've gotten nothing done. I haven't been pulled in for five sessions. I locked in kind of for 1 session and then I walked away. And I would say that that's worse than being pulled in for 5 and then eventually abandoning.
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts on this. So the development environment one, let's tackle that one. So I kind of agree with you. I think just a bare bones development environment isn't enough motivation for you to come back. And I think that's what you're kind of getting at as well, is like you want that like thing, like the cliffhanger, right? Like in a show, when you watch a TV show and a cliffhanger happens, you want to go back and watch, you want to go and watch the next episode. So you almost want to leave yourself a cliffhanger in like the first step of a project so that you have that motivation to go back. And again, I don't think a development environment setup is enough of a cliffhanger. That's way too like bare. I think a development environment setup and like work into a proof of concept is enough of a cliffhanger. Like if you want to try to build one feature, you set up the development environment, actually implement a feature or something like that. That's a good step. That's a good first step. That's a good, like probably a few hours of work there. You have something there. You've run into some issues. You've solved some issues, whatever, like you said. So on that one, like I agree with you. I don't think a development environment. I think for some people it might be, because in certain situations, the development environment might be so complicated that just setting it up is an accomplishment. So for instance, if you have like a Stripe integration, you have to set up like I don't know, some sort of integration into a CRM. Like if you have to set up some complex shit in your development environment, it could be enough to be like, okay, I got it to a point where now I can start building features, and now you're excited, right? Like you want to leave that session, that first step, with a little bit of excitement into what's happening next. And so if the development environment is enough for you to get there, that is your indicator that it's okay. The other thing like I want to talk about is a couple of different options, not development related, as a first step as well. Something that I like to do, whether it's an internal app that I'm making or an app for myself or whatever, like I created a little tool for a podcast recently that pulls in some metadata and pulls in some information to make it easier to cross-post our blog posts and podcast episodes onto dev.to, right? Because I like to, I have an audience on there. I like to cross-post onto there. To do that, I had to like talk to Matt a bit. So that was like a little bit of a requirements gathering session, figure out what's going on there, right? And then I had to look and do the thing manually first, right? And be like, what is the easiest part for me to automate? And then that's what I focused on, right? Like, so I identified the problem. I got an understanding of what the problem is. I talked to a stakeholder. I talked to the audience that I'm creating it for, which is myself and Matt. And that got me excited. And that was enough of a first step for me to come back to it the next day and then set up the development environment and go actually and create the feature, right? So like some validation could be enough for you. If you're, making a feature for plumbers or making an app for plumbers, talking to the plumbing community in some way, shape, or form, I assume you have access to them since you've decided to make a feature for, or an app for them, and like pitching them on an idea might be enough of a first step, right? Like, again, it's that validation to get the motivation to come back to it the next day. So that to me is the most important part of a first step. The next steps, you're building on the snowball, that's all different, but that first step you want to come back to.
I like the idea of the cliffhanger. That's a good visualization, I think, because I mean, yeah, like the end of a TV, like especially a serialized TV show where the story keeps continuing each episode and keeps going. The cliffhanger is a great way to make people click, next episode and do that binge watch. They keep watching, and they stay up too late or whatever, watch all weekend. That's a great way to get that. And it's like, if you could capture the idea of that cliffhanger of trying to get someone to binge watch or like binge develop within reason, of course. I mean, that's a good visualization, I think, for people, because like what I'm talking about is like, I don't want to say it's philosophical. It's not like super complicated, but I was just thinking to myself, like we have these lists, and this is when I was like conceptualizing the idea of the episode. And it's like, we have these lists, and most of us do. And it's become almost a meme, or really kind of is a meme at this point, that devs have all these ideas and all these things, all these ideas and all these domains. And I always thought to myself, I was like, well, every one of those is kind of a first step. Like you've taken the first step of actually purchasing the domain. The first step of any project is supposed to be the hardest. Just to reiterate, right? It's like, why is the domain not enough? And you're right. It's like the cliffhanger. Because if you think about like another project, if you're a person that's restoring cars, maybe there is an equivalent to buying a domain name in the car restoration business. But from the outside looking in, all I can think of is you have an old car in the garage and you get started, right? You look at what you, at the very least, take an inventory list of what needs to be replaced or fixed or what parts are missing. And you like go through and you start shopping for those parts, or you take a panel off and you sand it down, and the list goes on and on. You see if you can get it running first. You see if the engine's good, or whatever the steps are. It's a physical thing that you're going out into the garage and you're doing that and you're trying to get this going. And then if you do get it running, it's like, oh, okay, cool. Does it run reliably? Does it run and drive? Like, that's two different things. Things like that. Is the body in good shape? Do we need additional parts? Can we get parts? Do we want original parts? Do we want repop parts? What do we want? And that gets your brain kind of going down that train of thought. Whereas obviously for developers, we're, mostly, unless we're dealing with like a gadget, we're mostly not dealing with a physical thing. And so we kind of have to emulate that and be like, okay, like what should we be doing? I actually just thought of another one too. For us, setting up a task list is also not a meaningful first step either. We've done that 100 million, 1,000, bajillion, not that many times in Trello, where we're like, these are all the blog posts we need on the site for SEO purposes. These are what we want. And we come up with like 40 and we're like, okay, perfect. So whenever we want to go write something, we'll just go to the list and then start writing. And then again, you're overwhelming yourself. Just like how the idea list is overwhelming yourself. I think that's overwhelming yourself. Having a few is fine, right? Having like 4 or 5, something like that, especially if you don't want to forget a good idea, jotting it down totally makes sense. But Mike and I have made so many Trellos where we even have like almost like CRM features where we're like, when it's in progress, we do this, and this is the process. We add a comment so we know where it is, and then we put it into like production and pre-production and then published, and then there's a marketing thing, and tasks automatically get made and they get different colors and tags. Again, it's like I just kind of spent my time in Trello doing busy work, and it wasn't enough, at least for me personally, to go back. And Mike, like how many times have you gone back to that Trello? Like what did we spend, maybe 2-3 weeks? And it was diminishing over that time, going back to the Trello, and then it just kind of died, and we didn't write any blog posts, we didn't put anything out. It doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly. And again, this is a personal thing. It might work for others.
Mm-hmm.
That might be a perfectly valid first step that works great for others. That makes them motivated to come back and check off those boxes. Does not work for Matt or myself.
No, not at all.
And this is the important part about this discussion, is to figure out what that first step is for you, I think.
What type of cliffhanger
right?
do you like?
Yeah, exactly. Like what we've given you are cliffhangers, they will probably not work for you. So try to figure out your own. That's how like most productivity tools, in my opinion, are not made for everyone. And so you need to figure out what the best productivity tool is for you. Like regardless of like, is it a to-do list? Is it a paper and pencil? Is it a specific type of to-do list? This is the same thing. You need to figure out what works best for you. And the only way to do that, unfortunately, is trial and error and trying different ones until you have one that actually like, oh, I do want to go back this time. And then next time you're like, I do want to go back again. Okay, I think I figured it out. So you got to let yourself fail a little bit there, which I think people are afraid to do as well. And that's another like stopping factor for them.
It's interesting too, because it's like, I mean, I've said this in the past, but like I've taken up golf the last few years, and one of the things that people will often talk about is all the golf apps and gadgets, right? Where you go out, and this is going to sound unrelated, but it is related. Where they go out and they'll go on their phone on an app, maybe on their watch as well, and they'll say like start round, and they can track their score, and there's maybe even GPS component, and they can check ranges and the whole bit. And I remember I was talking to my friend about this, and I said, one of the things that I like about that is that it exists. Like it's a cool idea, and it's like, advanced technology. And if people are practicing for tournaments or things like that are a bit more serious, it makes a lot of sense. But him and I both came to the conclusion that we both don't like using them, and we've tried to use them several times. And the idea of that was because we're always on our phones. in our personal lives, and we're not on our phone, or like we don't want to be on our phone when we're out in nature kind of thing. And then, yes, I understand it's like a groomed nature, obviously, because it's a golf course, but still, it's like I'm out doing a physical activity. Why am I constantly on my phone, like checking things and trying to make sure reception's good and things like that? However, my cliffhanger was I kept losing the scorecards at the end of rounds. I kept like losing them and not knowing what my score was. It's like, did I do good? Have I gotten better this season? What is it? And so my cliffhanger was, okay, I need to find a way to quickly like jot these down that's better than just like a notes app. So I can tell if I've gotten better. I want to see how many rounds I've done, etc. And so now I just like found, like in my case, it's the Golf Canada app, which can do all those fancy things that I said, but I literally take a picture of the scorecard as a backup, just so I have it. And then I go into Golf Canada and religiously just type the round, the course, the amount of like the score, the stroke count, and that's it. And it's like something where it's something like it's totally unrelated to the game being successful. Like I could go out and successfully complete a round of golf without doing this. But it's like enough of a cliffhanger, enough of a motivator for me to be like, I want a decent data set. Like I want to know if I'm getting better. I want to know how I did at these expensive places. And I want to know like where I've been. Like, have I been to this fancy club? Have I been there? Have I been here? I want those records. And so it's enough of that, again, cliffhanger. But many of my friends will just, I mean, even the guy I was just talking about just writes it in the Notes app on the Apple iPhone, right? It's like whatever the Notes app is called on there. But it's like that is enough for him where he just likes to jot it down. If he misses around, he doesn't care. Whereas like I'm more of the data set guy. And so Mike's 100% correct in that the motivation is going to be unique. Like both of our motivations started out unique or started out the same. Where like meeting my golf buddy, where it was like, hey, we do not want to be in our phones as much. Perfect. So we use the physical paper. But now we keep losing the freaking physical paper. So what do we do? And then the solutions are similar, but realistically, like kind of radically different. Where he's not getting many like stat breakdowns, or he's not getting any unless he does them himself, and I'm getting stat breakdown. And so if you can find that thing that motivates you enough to like actually do it, I think you'll have like hopefully a successful idea in your hand. At the very least, it can be successfully created in most cases, right? As long as it's within the parameters of like your coding ability and stuff, it can be successfully created. Whether the market likes it, whatever, that's a whole other roll of the dice. But at the very least, then you can do what Mike said: cross it off the list if it sucks, and get rid of that domain. Stop paying for it.
Yeah, I think that's it. Like, I think we've talked about that first step. I think this is a good lead up episode to maybe talking about the next step, right? Like there's many steps needed to create a good product. Now, Matt and I maybe don't have the ton of experience in the next step. So I think we'll have to do some of our own experimentation and create a product for you all. And then we can talk about what comes next.
Which is a big ask. Like it's a lot.
Yes.
It's just create a quick project, bro. Although we've talked about it a bunch, and like, I mean, one day maybe, one day we'll start with buying a domain name. Anyway, no, we won't be doing that. But anyway, I think that concludes this episode. And let us know, like in the comments. Like I know we've been getting some pretty helpful comments, some feedback on Spotify. This is the first episode again that we're trying to do that's a bit more conversational. I guess it's almost like web news-esque if you're a longtime listener. So you can like kind of ish. So like let us know. I thought it was like a little smoother, but I also wanted to do this, so I don't know for sure. Please let us know if you like this or more of the lecture type thing. And I do think there's still a place for lectures. Like if Mike is trying to teach me something about React, I mean, he's going to have to lecture me. Like, how else do you do it? But hopefully you like this. Again, let us know in the comments, send us an email, whatever. Reach out to us on the socials as well, of course, if you want to do that. And if you want to support episodes like this, remember we are on Patreon. That's patreon.com/HTML, all the things. And many thanks to our $3 tier patrons. Tim from the Web Hacker on thewebhacker.com. Jason from Geek Life Radio via geekliferadio.com. Garrett Segal, Level Up Financial Planning via www.levelupfinancialplanning.com. Magnus from YesWeb via yesweb.se. Syntaxify from the HTML All the Things Discord server. And Stacy Mosteler from the website swoonworthydesigns.com. I'd also like to give a shout out to Michael LaRocca, a contributing author on HTMLallthethings.com. Michael is the author of Self-Taught the X Generation blog at selftaught.txg.com. And remember, you can get up to 20% off your Scribba subscription. If you want to learn how to code front end, back end, just straight up full stack now, you can do so with our affiliate link. Full details will be in the show notes on htmlallthethings.com. And our affiliate link is scribba.com/links/HTML all the things. Feel free to leave a comment or review in the platform that you are listening to this on. And this outro will sign us off.
You've been listening to HTML All the Things podcast. Web development, web design, and small business. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. And we hope you appreciate that we talk to you like human beings. And we hope you had some fun. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit us up on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Patreon at HTML All the Things. And on Twitter at HTML Everything. Until next time, this is HTML All the Things, signing off.